some things are lovely to look at, but they're not great to live with. So that might be a reasonable sacrifice to a lot of people. Right, I thought we'd have a fun game for this Saturday's episode. And you probably do this all the time. But here's the scenario, right? So the government come to us and say, right, Mr. Motorbike Rider, this is it. You know, the resources are running out, you know, we're running out of oil, we can't build anything else. You're only allowed one more vehicle for the rest of your life. And for us, it's one more motorbike. We can have one more motorbike to spend the rest of our life with. What are you going to choose? Okay, you can't get one and think, oh, that's not the right one. You got to make the choice. It's got to be right first time. And I thought it'd be interesting to go through my criteria. We'll go for a ride, and what my criteria is for picking the one and only bike that I'm now allowed to have. Okay, and how I would work through that. And I thought it'd be interesting to ask the question: have you had this bike before? Is it a bike that because you're going to make the choice as well, and you can put it in the comments just for the fun of it. Is it a bike you already had once that was your perfect bike? And, you know, like me, you know, you go through your bikes like anything. So you chop and change. So let's have a ride around, have a bit of fun. Okay. You know, because this might not be that far from the truth one day, mightn't it? Someone might say, no, you can only have one bike and that for the rest of your life. We're going to go a bit communistical. Is that a word? So let's go and pick that bike. I'll give you my criteria, and then in the comments later you can give me what your criteria was and what bike you ended up with, and see if there's more bikes selected which is the same than anybody else. Because when we get to the end of the video, I'm going to take you to the bike that I chose. Okay, and that's something I filmed a while ago when it was warmer, because we're now coming into autumn. It's lovely now, isn't it? Lovely in the autumn. So. And I did go and look at that bike because it's something I did a while ago, but I never used that bit of footage. So I've been waiting to use that little end bit of footage for ages and ages. So come on, let's go and do a ride and have a bit of fun and see what bike I chose and see if it's anybody else chose that bike. And I'll tell you why I chose it. Come on. Right, let's go on a voyage of discovery. Do you think you're going to guess what my bike is? You might do. Right, onwards. So, remember what I said, it can't be not your favourite bike, because that won't work really, because there's bound to be something that was, you know, that bike won't be able to achieve. Because if I just went, right, I'm going to pick my favourite bike, that's easy. Okay, that's an easy game, picking your favourite bike. Because mine would be the my Triumph Thunderbird 900. You know, that was just an awesome bike, and I just love that. And it's one bike that I still miss. You know, I think, oh, I wish I still had that bike. You know, it just looked great, rode fantastic, sounded epic, and it was just a great bike. But it's not a bike I could have lived with for the rest of my life, because it had, a few little foibles. One, it was carburetted, so with current fuels that we use, it would have needed, quite a bit of fettling, I would say, I guess. And it took a while to warm up. There's something to be said for the beauty of fuel injection and that sort of stuff, because you can just get on your bike and go, can't you, these days? And that you sort of could and couldn't, you needed to tinker to get it to run right. So, and it was starting to leak oil a little bit and stuff. So that's out of the question, but it was a lovely bike. So, but it does need to be, the first criteria, it does need to be a bike that I want, and a bike that I really want to live with. That when I look at it, when I get into the garage, I think, oh yeah, I want to get into that, but I want to sit on that bike. That's great. Okay, so it's got to be that. So it's got to look good. You know, I don't want it to just be, you know, just two wheels and a fuel tank and, you know, an engine. It's got to have something that I really want. Okay, so I've got bikes like that. You know, I've got my, let's look at my Harley Davidson. Fantastic. What a great bike to look at. And, you know, it's fast and all the rest of it. I said, well, I just have my Harley. That's great. And then I think, well, what's the downside of that Harley? Well, the main one, it does about 5 miles before you have to put some more fuel in it because the tank is sort of so wee. So that would become a bit annoying after a while. So I couldn't really tour on it quite so easily, you know. I don't think that's the thing. It's not a one-trick pony. It does a lot of things really great, that bike, but it's not a bike I would want to live with for the rest of my life. I'd want a bit more from it than that, and maybe just because it's just so. Has such a pants fuel range, or you know, range on it is just terrible. So that wouldn't cut it. Okay, so that's going to rule that out. But it is a really, really pretty bike. So that's given me another bit of criteria, isn't it? So I've got to have something that's going to give me, let's say, good gas miles, because you know, by the time we've got to the end of riding our bikes, you know, we're going to be paying, you know, £400 a gallon, aren't we? At that point, so I need it to be fairly efficient by today's standards. You know, I can live with sort of middle of the road fuel efficiency, I suppose. So Harley's out, and I think, well, okay, well, what about the Stonello? You know, pretty bike. You know, what a pretty bike. You know, it's got all the bits on it, isn't it? It's got the looks, without the doubt. Reasonable on fuel, I'd say it's pretty reasonable on fuel. Not the best, but it's okay. I can get a good couple of 100 miles out of that, so that's okay. But what's the downside of the Stonello? Well, it's the flipping suspension in it. It's just too hard. It's like, ugh! You know, there's a bit too much of that going on, and that would just drag me down eventually. I just, oh God. You know, it's lovely to look at and all the rest of it. It's a bit like, I don't know, it'd be like some sort of supermodel, and it's lovely to look at. Want to go out with it, that's terrible. I'm going to get some complaints. But you know what I mean? It's sort of like, some things are lovely to look at, but they're not great to live with. So that might be a reasonable sacrifice to a lot of people. But anyway, I'm going to get in trouble for that. But you know where I'm coming from. The suspension is just too hard, and I just couldn't live with it. In the end, and our roads are getting worse. You know, I need something where it can cope with bad roads. The suspension's okay. So beautiful bike, you know, good gas miles, but it's just suspension's just too rock hard. Okay, so you sort of think, well, okay, what about an adventure bike? Now, I had my Africa 500. I mean, there's not a lot to not like about the Africa 500, was there? My beloved Honda that I, you know, tarted up and did all my customizing on it and rode it down to North Africa. Phenomenal bike. What's the downside to that? Well, it's not a one-trick pony. It did a lot of things well, and it looks great, but it wouldn't give me that slight essence of what a motorbike should be to me. You know, it should give you a certain feeling, you know, when you're riding it, that you know, those sort of things, those sort of like Steve McQueen moments and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? When you think, well, I want the bike to make me feel something a little bit more. Yes, it made me feel like I was going on an adventure with that bike, but that's all it really did. You know, it did it very well. I must admit, it did it fantastically well, but it just not quite enough. What about another adventure style bike though? And this was a very close runner-up for me. And I've ridden a few of these in different guises, in the different year models and stuff. And it is an absolutely superb piece of kit. And if I was going to do more touring than anything else, you know, rather than, you know, a nip down to the pub or to the cafe and all the stuff, those sort of rides they do, then you might have guessed it, the NC750X, Honda NC750X in manual gearbox is just a phenomenal bike. you know, I rode that one beginning of this year, wasn't it? I think the orange one, the 2025 model. What a fantastic bike! You know, that bike really is a sort of do-it-all bike. It is so good, but it just misses that essence of, to give me a little bit of excitement. And it's not, the engine's not good. I think the engine is one of the best engines in a motorbike for an all-purpose, you know, do-it-all sort of bike. But I just think that it just misses that. I'm going to call it the Steve McQueen moment. That's what it loses for me a little bit. That Steve McQueen moment. So what about this bike then? Now, I've said before, and I've said it on film, I still think the Classic 350 is one of the best bikes ever produced. I really do. You know, I just think it just has so much going for it. And I'm sure that this bike will be, you know, when all everything's said and done, will go down as one of the best bikes ever produced, and certainly modern bikes ever manufactured. It just, God, it's so much to so many people, isn't it? You know, and so you sort of think, well, when you're saying that, why wouldn't you have this as your only bike? And a lot of people would. A lot of people would. You know, if you lined up X amount of bikes and said, well, you can only have one, and this was in the lineup, I'd take this. I would take this for certain bikes, but I got more choice, haven't I? And why wouldn't I have this as my one and only bike? Because again, it's an incredibly close call. It's just I want something to give me that little bit extra power. So when I do some touring, not that I wouldn't tour on this, because I ain't going to be touring on this in a few weeks' time, so look out for that. But I want just that little bit of heart-stopping extra power occasionally. You know, if I didn't need that, I didn't need the extra power in my life, then it probably would be this bike. But I need a little bit more grunt, I think, for a motorbike, just to give me those little heart-stopping moments. You know, that just to increase the heart rate a little bit. And even though the Classic 350 is an extraordinary bike, and it really is, well, anybody says that it hasn't got enough power, you know, for this, it has. It's just an extraordinary bike, you know, that sits out in all weathers and does all that stuff, and it starts and goes and does what it's supposed to do, and it's incredible, isn't it, really? When you think how successful this bike has been, you know, you cannot knock it. You really cannot knock it. And that brings me on to another point: reliability. I need a bike that's going to be reliable. You know, are there bikes out there which seem pretty damn cool but seem to have a few issues? You know, I know we've had the old KTM argument, and you know, the Chinese bikes going to give you issues. Not that they're going to be unreliable, but can you get the bits and pieces from them? Stuff like that. So things like that you have to consider. But as time goes on, you know, those problems will start to disappear. But you know what, I mean, some Harleys can be a little bit unreliable, I suppose, at the end of the day. Some of the Italian manufacturers can be a little bit iffy, you know, dare I say that, things like Ducati and stuff. But none of these bikes are really as bad as they used to be, are they? Because I think, you know, manufacturing is so good now. They sort of, these things reoccur because of their historical component of it, and that's probably nearly not really the case so much anymore. You know, we don't see a lot of bikes failing, do we, really? And if you do, it's mainly sort of some of the cheaper components that might put on them, things like chains and tyres and things. But reliability, the bike's got to be reliable. That's a really, really key thing, because, you know, and parts have got to be available. Parts are available, you know. Are you any closer to knowing what I'm actually thinking about bike-wise that I'm going to have? Have we drawn any conclusions? And have I had that bike before? It's going to give you something to ponder, isn't it? So let's sum up some of those qualities in it. It's got to be reliable, comfortable, okay? So it's got to be able to do a bit of touring, you know. I've got to want to look at it. I want to go to the garage and look at that. Oh yeah, you know, I want to get off that bike, walk away, and I want to look back at it. I want to get, that's still a fantastic bike, you know. I want to see that. I get excited. I want to get on it, and when I get on it, I want it to make me feel something. You know, I want that Steve McQueen moment. I want that feeling that I'm somebody else, or you know, it might be for some people the Barry Sheen moment. You know, we no idea. You know, that's why never look in the mirror when you get dressed in the morning. Do your hair. Never look in the mirror. Just imagine what you look like, and just keep that in your head. It's very important not to look at the mirror, isn't it? Or if you wear glasses, like I don't put your glasses on. You look in the mirror because it'll spoil the illusion. So, reliable, easy to maintain, makes you feel like Steve McQueen. You know, looks great, rides great, has enough power for what you want. You know, that it makes you, you know, you can do overtakes with it and all that great stuff. You know, sounds good. It's got to sound good, isn't it? Okay. So, I don't know what your bike was, and I asked that question before. Have you owned your one and only bike before? The bike that you would finish your riding career on? And I've done this thing about, you know, the bikes that you would ride that could keep you riding longer, that would be lightweight and all the rest of it. We're sort of discounting that slightly, but this is a bike I think I could carry on until the bitter end. and when we get to the bitter end, I'll just be buried with it. So come on, we'll swap the bikes. We'll get onto the bike that I finished this video with some time ago, and I'll take you to the bike that would be my last bike. The one bike that when the government come to me in their communistical way and say, you can only have one bike, sir. What's it going to be? And you can't change your mind. This is the one it'll be. Come on, let's get to that bit of the video. But wait, hang on, I'm going to show you what the bike is. He's going into a Harley dealership. What's the matter with this man? What the hell? Hang on, don't tell me he's buying a Pan American. No. Don't be silly. Is it a Iron Horse 90 something or other? No. No. Did you even guess what it was? Of course it was the Interceptor. It's probably the best bike I've ever owned that just did everything well. I don't even know why I got rid of it. But if it's your choice as well, one thing I would say, you might want to get in quick because they don't make it anymore and we don't know whether it's coming back. So you might want to come and see these guys at Sykes Enfield because they might need to help you. Anyway, you didn't think it was going to be a Harley, honestly, did you? Well, possibly. See you in the next video, everybody. Take care. Right, so there you go. That's my pick. And I still stand by that. I still think the Interceptor is an absolutely phenomenal bike, you know. And it just always made me feel good. There were. I remember there just being a time when I rode that bike. It was an early evening. The sun was starting to go down. You know, it was warm. You know, the air was warm. And I just felt awesome riding that bike, and I've never forgotten that little few minutes on that bike at that point stayed with me and made me think, Jesus, this is a good bike. This is such a great bike. Right, don't forget to tell me what your one bike is. You know, when you can only have one, what will it be? And you might have to give me some of the reasons. Or you'll just go in a blaze of glory on your favourite bike and be done with it. Right, I'll see you next time, everybody. Please ride safe as we come into the autumn and roads get a little bit slippery. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.